You've inherited a house. And no, this isn't Oprah. There's not keys under your seats. It's a metaphor. It's been paid for, and it's been in your family for generations. You've known the story of this house for your entire life. It was built from the ground up by your far distant grandparents, and it was further shaped by every generation since. Your twice great aunt added that extra room on the first floor. It was your own grandfather who added the marble countertops. So many stories in your family have centered around how wonderful this house is. And now it's in your hands. You're excited. It's beautiful with unique architecture and great views. This is the house you're going to raise your children in. This is the house you will someday pass down. We can become attached to the places we call home. We, as human beings, have a unique capacity for sentimentality and nostalgia. We polish up our memories and associations and tell ourselves and others lovely stories about the familiar places and people, our histories, and histories we hold dear. One such familiar, nostalgic story is told to many of our children at school each year. Tomorrow is Columbus Day, children. Columbus, who was the only one who believed the earth was round, spoiler alert, not true, convinced Spain to send him on a voyage where he discovered America. A few years later, the pilgrims seeking freedom of religion came to the newly discovered land and built a settlement. When they got in trouble and were in danger of starving, the Indians helped them out by teaching them how to plant. Then the pilgrims held the very first Thanksgiving and invited the Indians over for dinner. It's a tidy story. It's noble and even contains some elements of truth. It's a story I love. It speaks of human cooperation. It speaks of gentleness and hospitality between strangers. And just like the old family house, it's beautiful and it's been handed down to us for generations. But what if the house has problems? When we dig into the reality of what happened when Europeans came to the United States, it's like finding out the strong, sturdy foundation your house was built on was actually something else, something unexpected. A few weeks ago here, we talked about how the first African-American slaves brought to the United States were brought in 1619. We've long been aware of slavery, although we still struggle as a nation to understand its ongoing negative effects on all people in this country. That day, we took a glance at a part of our house's foundation. European treatment of and interaction with indigenous people here goes even deeper. One of the first things Columbus did when he arrived in the Americas in 1492 was take slaves. In his trips back and forth from his home to the Americas, it's believed that Columbus murdered or enslaved over 5,000 people. And it didn't stop there. I can't cover all the details of what happened, but I can tell you that when Europeans came to America, they discovered a well-established system of governments, organizing relations between different communities. They discovered trade and transportation hubs, pathways that would become highways later on. Roseanne Dunbar Ortiz, a scholar on this history and an author, speculates that without the system set up, without the already cultivated land areas, the settlers would not have survived. Guided by the doctrine of discovery, settlers believed they had the moral and legal right to conquer any areas and peoples they found. By the time the United States was fighting the war for independence from Britain, indigenous tribes were banding together and fighting back against the fledgling government and the settlers sent against their land. By the 1780s, during George Washington's first administration, the founders of the United States decided it was necessary to totally destroy the Native Americans in the area of Kentucky in order to break up Native American alliances. You can find a document with the actual words that Washington wrote about this. And I didn't want to tell you about that. I didn't want to mention even this little bit of Washington's role in the violent slaughter of the indigenous peoples of this land. You see, I loved those stories, the things I learned in high school about the founding fathers, about their quest for freedom, and how remarkable it was that they actually won. Those stories became a part of me and how I try to move through the world. So it hurt to read about this when I learned the depth of moral crimes committed against Native Americans in this country. It was painful. But sometimes the stories we want to hear the least are the ones we need to hear the most. The beautiful house I was given by my ancestors seems to have termites and those old lead-lined pipes. The goal of taking land from Native Americans didn't stop with traditional warfare. Our country took women and children hostage and murdered civilians in order to pacify areas. It was during this time where we hired militias and mercenaries, giving them bounties based on the number of scalps they brought back. And the violations continued. Many of you know about the Trail of Tears, in which the Cherokee people were forced by the U.S. government to go on an overland trek that killed over 4,000. And the promises of safety, of homeland, the very treaties we created with one another were violated over and over again. So we find that our beautiful house has a basement that floods when it rains, and one of the rooms has mold behind the walls. This is rough stuff, folks. Our national identity has long been focused on noble visions. We want to be the nation that fights for freedom, who stands for what is right, who takes care of others. And it can hurt to face the ways we've fallen short of that vision. Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. says, "Our nation was born in genocide. We are perhaps the only modern nation which tried, as a matter of national policy, to wipe out its indigenous population. Moreover, we elevated that tragic experience into a noble crusade." And he's right. We taught our children to play cowboys and Indians. We told them sweet stories about Christopher Columbus or the first Thanksgiving. Dr. King goes on to say, "Indeed, even today we have not permitted ourselves as a nation to reject or feel remorse for this shameful episode." But there's hope. I think we are starting to. We know that our home has problems. As all owners of old homes know, when we've been working to fix one thing, we're often startled and disheartened that our attempt at that fix reveals another problem. Has anyone seen that show, Bless This Mess? A couple of you. In it, a couple acquires a home, and everything that they fix leads to something else that needs fixing. Facing this stuff about our country's history can feel a little like living in such a house. Now that we've started to see what's going on in our home, the shiny joy we felt when we inherited it might be waning, the sentimental nostalgia fading. But our love for it doesn't have to. Because we see the problems, we have opportunities to fix them. Each of us has a role in caring for this house, making it more secure and a more joyful place for those who inherit it from us. So how do we do it? What tools do we use to repair our house? Like anyone who does repairs, we need a set of tools. One of the first tools we reach for is knowledge. We need to know what's wrong with the house. We need to understand our own history, our true history, in order to know the areas that need repaired. Considering next year's 400th anniversary of the Pilgrims landing on Plymouth Rock, the UUA is suggesting, the Unitarian Universalist Association is suggesting a denomination-wide common read of the book, An Indigenous People's History of the United States. We'll be holding a study group here at East Liberty to read and discuss this book together. Look for more information about that soon. The next tool we need is the ability to acknowledge and talk about what happened. I've been considering how to balance all these pieces of knowledge I have about George Washington and what that means. It isn't easy, but it's an important step on the way to repairing damage to the house. One way we are doing this as a country is the move to shift from honoring the second Monday in October as Columbus Day to celebrating it as Indigenous Peoples Day. This holiday was first proposed in 1977, has grown to be recognized by hundreds of cities and even some states. And here is the hardest and most important tool to find in our box. Through all of this, we need to be able to sit with the discomfort. If you do a deep dive into the history of our country, especially around our treatment of non-white folks, you will find some stuff that is disturbing. You will find things that challenge the stories we are all taught about our home while we're in school. It's uncomfortable. It's sad. And none of us like feeling that way. Instead of sitting with it, instead of using that discomfort to take the next step, it's easy to want to slide out of it. I know I do. I want to be the good guy, the cowboy wearing the white hat. I want those I love to be easily definable as good. I want my sentimental memories of my home to remain just as they have been. But I'll tell you that sitting with the discomfort, figuring out how we can balance the ideals we cherish with the reality of people who haven't lived into them, even if they tried. We need this skill in our toolbox more than any other. And this is where religion provides the most support. Our spiritual ancestors have taught us that not only are our people imperfect, but imperfect people are worthy of love and never without hope for redemption. That we can fail and fail and fail to live up to our values, but it's worth getting up and moving towards them again. That a country, that a home with genocide and slavery threaded into its very foundation can still change course. We can repair the foundation and fix the pipes and strive towards the dreams again. One amazing resource we have in our home repair toolbox is the new people who come along. Immigrants to our country, newly joined UUs, new friends and family who perhaps don't share our sentimental memories of growing up in the house, and can bring a fresh perspective and notice things we've started overlooking. When Virginia and I first moved into our house in South Bend, we were aware of every little crack on the floor and stain on the wall. As we were moving out this past summer, we realized we had gotten used to them over time and stopped seeing them altogether. New people can see things the rest of us can't see, or perhaps don't want to see. And this is a wonderful gift. This is why it's so vital to continue to welcome refugees and immigrants into this country. Let's hand them a hammer and invite them to join in the work. It won't be easy. We know that fixing a house can be expensive, both emotionally and financially. Sometimes you need to replace the flooring or put in all new pipes. You can't expect that the old house will look exactly the same as it did in your memories. That beautiful banister you fondly recall sliding down as a child may simply be unsalvageable. No, it won't be easy. But as those of you who have finished home repairs know, in the end, it's better. We have one set of tools left to put in our toolbox: advocacy. Find out what you can do to help others know the truth and protect that truth for the future. Here in Michigan, the Senate is considering Senate Bill 568 and 569. This pair of bills would replace Columbus Day with Indigenous Peoples Day for this state. Write your representative and encourage them to adopt these bills. Another way you can advocate is by building and strengthening connections with Native American communities in this area and making sure your groups, your church, your schools, your businesses are aware of issues facing these people. My beloved spiritual companions, our beautiful inherited house needs some repairs. It won't be easy, but we're called to this work. We are worthy of this work, and it is worthy of our effort, our time, and our love. May we learn. May we acknowledge the past. May we sit with our own discomfort, and may we take steps towards change. I believe we can do this together. May it be so. Amen.